That means we do need to create ourselves to the Hibernate to create the Hibernate cannot create the sequences. We need to be manually done the sequence creations. Otherwise, we cannot do the. Then that's the reason why we integrate the Flyway or Liquibase any migration tools. In the previous screencast, I have many screencast about the how can you use same Flyway migration script could be integrated in the Liquibase scripting, Liquibase database migration scripting, and the same script to the Liquibase database migration tools to use it. The same. We will discuss a little bit later for this part. So that means at the moment we will create the Hibernate will create the schema, and then after the Hibernate create the schema, we will build our database migration out of the schema. I will show you, and then we will integrate our migration tools as like Flyway or Liquibase, depending which type of tools we need to. But I will show you later. So let's have a start how can you start the implementations. That's I said the presentation part. So you have some requirements from your product owner or your managers. You make a plans, the sprint plans or agile based development or waterfall rule school, and you start the coding the development. So we have a requirements. The requirement was like so we have requirement like that. So we need to be implement some REST services based on the Spring Boot and Spring Boot data JPA, and then some monitoring tools and build tools and so on and so forth, and then all the possibility to deploy the application with the Docker and Kubernetes or Docker or Docker Compose or standalong jar file deployments. That's our requirements. So now we start our developments. How it is start? So that's I said there's a most professional way to start the developments. That's the professional structure. So we have a models, all your entity models. So I have entity models. So entity models, the user models and audit models, and then this is all models that's I need as per the requirement then clients. So you can create the project from Spring Initializer IO tools that I already show you in the last screencast. How can you create, even though you can create from the IntelliJ, because the IntelliJ in the community edition there is no possibility to create the Spring Boot applications, but you can go to the internet to Spring Boot Initializer, build the projects, initial projects, and import the project into the respective IDE. Doesn't matter which IDE you are in, that Eclipse or IntelliJ. And then I found that Eclipse also good tools, and IntelliJ is much better than Eclipse tools. There's more functionalities, more if plugging is together is there. They're very flexible. So we defined our all models. Let's go the first model, the user registrations. You see all the annotations. This is a Numbbook annotation. I use it, so it has all argument constructor, no argument constructor there, and then this entity models, and then the table names that we have it in the database levels. And this is one of the how can you call you already create, how can you call your sequences into your database, because I said it is the really professional way to handle how it is handling your database sequence creation. Maybe some SQL guy, he build a really complex procedure and functions to build a SQL script to generate the sequences, and after that you can call the sequences as like what we did it here. So you see the sequences, and maybe we can go to the database. We see the sequences that we create the sequences. Maybe there will be the complex sequences structure to create the primary key and foreign key keys of the data. So I put it like the very simple sequences. How can you create the sequences for and then after that he create the sequences in the manually, but in the later when we use the Flyway, then Flyway will create the sequences as I said here. So Flyway create the sequences is that as per definition what we put it here. For this case, we manually put the sequences in the SQL level, and then after that call the sequences into the Java level, and every entries will get the sequences what we expected. So that means the sequences, we have relationships, the mappings. This is the registration mappings. So let's go to the sequences, how it is called. We have a utility packet, and utility packet, it has the sequences ID. So you see, we are really professionally calling. So we implement the one extra class, implement the identifier generators, and then we select statement, the select next interval from the sequences that we already put, or that we already created by the Flyway or Liquibase, and then it's getting the really proper way. And exactly the same thing for the profile generator sequences, the different sequences, and 3 sequences, profile sequences, and the user role sequences. Exactly the 3 sequences, that's what we created into the database level. So user sequences, user profile, user registration sequence, and user profile, user. So it's user role sequence at 202, as I don't know how it is, at 210 is there, and 300 sequences is there. So it's exactly what we expected. So sequences is defined and then is implemented by Java. So when every time when entry is updated or deleted or inserted, then already sequences is checked, and it's getting the next number or next sequence number for this one. This is, as I said, this is really professional way to handle the sequences preparations. So that means we define our user registration. So you see all the attributes we call the sequences, and we have all the attributes, and then there is one-to-one relationship with the user registration profiles. And then if you go to the profile tables, we define all the entity itself is the tables, and it has one-to-one related with the user registration, the additional information for the users. So exactly the same call of the, how can say, same call of the your user register profile sequence call. So it's injected, and it has definition like the birth date, street, city, state, country, and so on and so forth. And this is one-to-one relationship between the user registration. So one-to-one relation is a lazy loading, best type lazy optional false, join column user user role ID, and then nullable false, and then say the user registration objects, and mapping one-to-one mappings. So is one-to mapping with the registration profile, and with the registration profile with the user registration, and then user registrations, and then you have a user roles. There is a unidirectionals, so only simple 3 Java objects or 3 tables we need to be create, because maybe you are working with the company, there is 400 500 tables you need to be built like that way. And this is because in the microservice world there is no such a case, one microservice containing 400 or 500 tables. It's impossible. But normally, if you are really professionally work in the industry or a small company, one microservice maximum containing 10 or 20 tables, and then that's the reason, the definition of microservice based applications. If you think one Amazon or Facebook or Google one web pages, maybe this page is containing 10 or 15 microservice call to containing only the filling, or only the effectively designing the one single web pages. So that means in the down level you are calling maybe 10 or 20 microservice call for building the only single web pages. That's why then nowadays the database is distributed, and small data sets, and the small databases, small schemas, and then microservice small base. Maybe you have a microservice for documentation, microservice for the invoices, the microservice for payments, for the microservice for administration, microservice for user registration. That's the one of the microservice we are talking about. How very simple way, how can you register your users, then thousands of users. So that means maybe user registration is one microservice. When you are logging into the single web page, you need the user register it, and then that's the user registration microservice. That's what I try to discuss with you and share with you. So we have user roles. So we have defined our entities, and like exactly the standard, nothing more special, nothing fancy here. So it has definition of the calling the user sequence number, user role sequence number, and then it has a one-to-many related. So that means one user has one to many